My boss fired me for stealing company funds. Then I found out the real thief was her husband. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I sat in the sterile conference room, my heart pounding like a trapped bird against my ribs. Across the table, Mr. Thompson's face was a mask of cold professionalism, but his eyes betrayed something darker, disappointment mixed with suspicion. Beside him, Ms. Patel from Human Resources clutched her clipboard like a shield, her expression unreadable behind her horn-rimmed glasses. "You understand why we've called you in here, don't you, Emma?" Mr. Thompson's voice cut through the air, sharp enough to slice tension. I shook my head numbly, though deep down, I already knew where this was heading. The past few weeks had been filled with strange glances and hushed conversations that always stopped when I entered a room. Ms. Patel cleared her throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the small space. "We've noticed some discrepancies in the company accounts." She paused, letting the words hang heavy in the air before continuing. "Specifically, in the accounts you've been managing. Large sums of money have gone missing, and unfortunately, all evidence points directly to you." The world tilted slightly as their words sank in. My hands trembled in my lap, fingers twisting together until they turned white. "That's impossible," I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible. "I would never." "We wish we could believe that," Mr. Thompson interrupted, his tone softening just enough to make it worse. "But the numbers don't lie, Emma. And neither do the security logs showing you accessing those accounts during late hours." Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. I remembered those late nights, the ones where I'd stayed back to perfect reports, to double-check figures, to ensure everything was absolutely perfect. The irony burned bitter in my throat as I realized those very actions were now being used against me. "Effective immediately," Ms. Patel continued, her voice clinical and detached, "your employment with this company is terminated. We'll need you to gather your personal belongings and leave the premises within the hour." She slid a termination letter across the table, its official seal mocking me from the crisp white paper. The walk back to my desk felt like moving through molasses. Colleagues who had once greeted me with warm smiles now avoided my gaze or whispered behind cupped hands. My chest tightened with each step, making it increasingly difficult to breathe. How could this be happening? After 5 years of dedicated service, countless overtime hours, and unwavering loyalty to the company, how could they think I was capable of such betrayal? As I mechanically packed my belongings into a cardboard box, memories assaulted me from every angle. The celebratory team lunches after landing big clients, the mentorship program I'd helped establish, the annual charity drives I'd organized, all of it now tainted by accusations that made my stomach churn. My hands shook so violently that I nearly dropped my favorite coffee mug, the one with the chipped handle that had become a running joke among my coworkers. The security guard escorting me out maintained a professional distance, but I could feel judgment radiating off him in waves. Each step toward the exit felt like wading through quicksand, pulling me further away from the life I'd built. The glass doors loomed ahead, and with each footfall, the weight of shame and disbelief pressed heavier upon my shoulders. Outside, the late afternoon sun bathed everything in golden light, cruelly beautiful against the storm raging inside me. I stood there on the sidewalk, clutching my box of belongings, feeling utterly lost and betrayed. The career I'd poured my soul into lay in ruins at my feet, and I had no idea how to begin picking up the pieces. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of disbelief and anger. I spent hours poring over bank statements and work documents, searching desperately for any clue that might prove my innocence. Sleep became an elusive stranger, and when it did come, it brought nightmares of accusing stares and slamming doors. Friends tried to reach out, but their well-meaning words felt hollow against the magnitude of my situation. It wasn't until the third night, lying awake in bed while staring at the ceiling, that a peculiar thought crept into my mind. Why had the discrepancies started appearing only 6 months ago? That timeline coincided suspiciously with when James had begun working remotely full-time. At first, I dismissed the notion. It was absurd to even consider, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and it refused to wither. James. My husband of 8 years. The man who had held me through countless storms, who had promised to stand by me through thick and thin. Could he possibly be involved in something so heinous? The mere suggestion felt like a betrayal in itself, yet the coincidence gnawed at me relentlessly. The next morning, I woke with determination stealing my resolve. If anyone could uncover the truth, it was me. I began by reviewing our joint financial records, something we had always kept transparent between us. What I found made my blood run cold. Small, unexplained deposits had been appearing in our account, amounts that matched the missing funds from work almost exactly. Each transfer bore a generic description, client payment, or consulting fee. My hands trembled as I cross-referenced these dates with the missing funds report I'd managed to sneak out of the office. The correlation was undeniable. But why? And how had James managed to access the company accounts without raising immediate suspicion? Determined to find answers, I began investigating James's recent activities. His home office, once a sanctuary of organization and order, now revealed subtle signs of deception. Hidden browser windows on his laptop, password-protected files that hadn't existed before, and most damning of all, a collection of burner phones stashed in the bottom drawer of his desk. Each discovery felt like a physical blow, knocking the wind from my lungs and leaving me gasping for air. The man I loved, the person I had trusted above all others, had apparently orchestrated this elaborate scheme right under my nose. The betrayal cut deeper than any accusation from my employer ever could. Yet amidst the devastation, a spark of clarity emerged. If James was indeed responsible, then proving his guilt would not only clear my name but also serve justice where it was due. The challenge now lay in gathering irrefutable evidence without alerting him to my suspicions. Every interaction between us became a delicate dance of normalcy, masking my inner turmoil. I recalled the times James had encouraged me to take on extra responsibilities at work, praising my dedication while subtly suggesting ways to gain more access to sensitive information. Had those conversations been innocent support or calculated manipulation? The memory of his supportive smile twisted into something sinister in my mind's eye. As I pieced together the puzzle, a chilling pattern emerged. James's newfound interest in cryptocurrency investments, his sudden insistence on maintaining separate business accounts, and his frequent late-night work calls all aligned perfectly with the timeline of the embezzlement. The realization hit me like a freight train. My husband hadn't just stolen from my company, he had deliberately set me up to take the fall. The weight of this knowledge settled heavily upon me, a mixture of rage and despair threatening to consume me whole. Yet beneath these tumultuous emotions, a fierce determination took root. I would not allow James to destroy everything I had worked for. More importantly, I refused to let him get away with betraying not just my trust, but the trust of everyone who had believed in me. Armed with this newfound purpose, I began documenting everything. Every suspicious transaction, every incriminating piece of evidence, every moment of James's behavior that now seemed glaringly obvious in hindsight. I created encrypted backups of all relevant data, storing them in multiple secure locations. The process was painstaking and emotionally exhausting, but with each step forward, I felt a measure of control returning to my life. Meanwhile, I maintained a carefully constructed facade of normalcy at home. James remained oblivious to my growing certainty about his involvement, continuing to play the role of concerned husband supporting his wrongfully accused wife. During dinner conversations, he would offer suggestions about legal representation or express frustration about workplace politics, all while the true culprit sat across the table from me. The cognitive dissonance was maddening. Here was the man I had shared my life with, discussing strategies to fight the very charges he had engineered. Yet I played along, nodding at appropriate moments and asking seemingly innocent questions that actually probed deeper into his fabricated story. Each interaction added another brick to the wall of evidence I was building against him. At night, when James believed I was sleeping, I would lie awake planning my next moves. I reached out discreetly to former colleagues, fishing for information about any unusual activity they might have noticed. I discovered that several other employees had experienced similar discrepancies in their managed accounts, though none had been caught or accused like I had. This revelation suggested a systematic approach to the embezzlement, one that required intimate knowledge of company protocols and security measures. The complexity of James's scheme became increasingly apparent. He hadn't merely dipped into company funds, he had created an entire network of false identities and shell accounts to launder the stolen money. The technical sophistication of his operation spoke volumes about his premeditation and careful planning. It also explained how he had managed to frame me so convincingly, by using my legitimate access points to create a trail that led directly back to me. As I delved deeper into the investigation, I encountered moments of doubt that threatened to derail my resolve. Was I truly capable of taking down the man I had once loved? Could I withstand the emotional toll of exposing him, knowing it would forever alter the course of both our lives? These questions haunted my quiet moments, but ultimately, they strengthened my determination rather than weakened it. I began reaching out to old contacts in the cybersecurity field, leveraging relationships I had cultivated throughout my career. Their expertise proved invaluable in tracing the digital breadcrumbs James had left behind. Together, we uncovered layers of encryption and sophisticated software that had allowed him to operate undetected for months. The scope of his operation was staggering, involving multiple companies and spanning international borders. With each new revelation, my strategy evolved. I knew that confronting James directly would be futile. He was too cunning, too practiced in deception to confess or crumble under pressure. Instead, I focused on building an airtight case that would withstand legal scrutiny. I documented not just the financial transactions, but also the psychological manipulation he had employed to maintain his facade of innocence. The emotional toll of this dual existence grew heavier with each passing day. In public, I maintained the appearance of a devastated employee fighting to reclaim her reputation. Privately, I transformed into a relentless investigator determined to expose the truth. The constant vigilance required to keep these worlds separate exhausted me, yet I drew strength from the knowledge that justice was within reach. During this period, I discovered unexpected allies in unlikely places. Former colleagues who had initially doubted my innocence began questioning the circumstances surrounding my termination. Some had noticed irregularities in their own departments that aligned with my timeline. Others simply couldn't reconcile the Emma they knew with the thief they were told I had become. These tentative supporters provided crucial moral support and occasionally valuable information that advanced my investigation. The turning point came when I uncovered a series of encrypted emails between James and an unknown contact. The messages detailed plans for a massive final transfer, one that would effectively drain significant funds from my former company. The timing suggested this operation was imminent, adding urgency to my mission. I realized that preventing this final heist would be key to dismantling James's entire operation and clearing my name. As I prepared to execute the next phase of my plan, I couldn't help but reflect on how dramatically my life had changed. The woman who had once worried about quarterly reports and team performance reviews now navigated a world of cybercrime and corporate espionage. The transformation was both terrifying and empowering, forcing me to confront aspects of myself I never knew existed. The morning sun filtered through the blinds as I carefully positioned myself in our home office, watching James through the partially open door. He sat at his desk, seemingly engrossed in what appeared to be legitimate work documents. The casual observer would see nothing unusual, just a man attending to his responsibilities. But I knew better. Beneath the surface of normalcy, wheels were turning in his mind, plotting his next move in this dangerous game of deception. My phone vibrated softly on the desk, signaling an incoming message from Sarah, a former colleague who had become one of my most trusted allies. She had agreed to help monitor unusual activity from the company's end while I gathered evidence at home. The text read, "Multiple login attempts detected on your old account. Initiated from remote location. Proceed with caution." A chill ran down my spine as I processed the implications. James was preparing to execute his final move, using my credentials to access the company system one last time. I had anticipated this moment, but now that it was here, the reality of confronting him directly filled me with equal parts fear and determination. Every fiber of my being screamed to stop him, to prevent the irreparable damage he intended to inflict, yet I forced myself to remain still, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. From my vantage point, I observed James's subtle tells, the slight twitch of his fingers as he typed, the way his jaw clenched when he encountered minor obstacles. These were the same mannerisms I had once found endearing, signs of his intense focus and dedication. Now, they marked the precise moment when his carefully constructed facade began to crack under pressure. I noted how frequently he glanced at his watch, how his breathing quickened imperceptibly as he neared completion of whatever task consumed him. The knowledge that I possessed evidence of his crimes gave me a peculiar sense of power. For months, I had lived in fear of discovery, of being exposed as the scapegoat he had intended me to be. Now, the tables had turned. Every document I had collected, every encrypted file I had decrypted, every trace of his digital footprint I had uncovered, all of it combined to form an ironclad case against him. Yet I hesitated, knowing that rushing in prematurely could jeopardize everything I had worked so hard to achieve. Instead, I focused on documenting this critical moment. My phone's camera captured his movements in meticulous detail, recording the exact sequence of his actions as he navigated the company's systems. I watched as he accessed files he had no legitimate reason to touch, manipulating data streams with the confidence of someone who had done this countless times before. The realization that he had been operating under our roof, using our resources to facilitate his crimes, made my stomach churn with revulsion. Sarah's next message arrived just as James initiated the transfer protocol. System anomaly detected. IT department alerted. Approximate response time, 15 minutes. The timing was perfect. I had precisely 15 minutes to gather conclusive evidence while maintaining the illusion that everything was proceeding according to James's plan. The pressure mounted with each passing second, but I welcomed it. This was the moment I had been preparing for, the culmination of months of careful observation and strategic planning. As James worked, I noticed something I hadn't seen before, a flash of genuine emotion crossing his features. It wasn't the cold calculation I had come to expect, but rather a flicker of something else. Regret? Fear? Perhaps even remorse? The brief display of vulnerability caught me off guard, threatening to unravel the steely resolve I had cultivated. For a moment, I saw not the criminal mastermind who had orchestrated this elaborate scheme, but the man I had once loved, the man who had promised to stand by me through anything. The conflict within me intensified. Part of me wanted to confront him then and there, to demand answers and explanations for the pain he had caused. Another part recognized the importance of maintaining my position, of allowing events to unfold naturally while ensuring I had irrefutable proof of his guilt. The internal struggle manifested physically, a tightening in my chest, a trembling in my hands, as I fought to maintain control over my emotions. James's movements became more agitated as the transfer progressed. He began muttering under his breath, phrases I couldn't quite catch but that carried the unmistakable tone of desperation. The transformation was startling, watching the confident manipulator morph into someone gripped by anxiety and fear. Yet even as he unraveled before my eyes, he continued executing his plan with methodical precision, each action bringing him closer to completing the final stage of his operation. The clock ticked down mercilessly, each second stretching into eternity as I balanced on the knife edge of revelation. I knew that within minutes, the company's IT department would detect the unauthorized transfer attempt. Security protocols would engage, locking James out of the system and potentially alerting authorities. The question remained, would I have enough time to secure the evidence I needed to ensure his complete exposure? My phone buzzed again, this time with a more urgent message from Sarah. Transfer detected. System lockdown initiated. Police notified. ETA, 10 minutes. The game was changing rapidly now, moving beyond my control. The careful orchestration I had planned was giving way to chaos, and I had to decide whether to intervene or let events unfold naturally. As I watched James struggle against the system's defenses, attempting to force the transfer through before the lockdown completed, I realized that this moment represented more than just the resolution of a crime. It symbolized the shattering of illusions, the destruction of trust, and the birth of a new chapter in my life. Whatever happened next would define not just my future, but my understanding of human nature, love, and redemption. The final moments before the police arrived felt like they stretched into eternity. James's fingers flew across the keyboard, his face a mask of desperation as he tried to override the system's defenses. The sound of his rapid breathing filled the room, punctuated by frustrated curses when commands failed to execute. I remained hidden in the shadows of the doorway, my phone recording every second, while my mind raced through the implications of what was about to unfold. Come on, James muttered under his breath, slamming his palm against the desk when another attempt to bypass the security protocols failed. His usual composure had completely unraveled, replaced by a frantic energy that bordered on panic. For the first time since uncovering his betrayal, I saw him not as the calculating criminal who had manipulated me and countless others, but as a man cornered, desperate to escape the consequences of his actions. And yet, even in this moment of vulnerability, there was no room for sympathy. The lives he had destroyed, the careers he had ruined, the trust he had shattered, loomed larger than any fleeting sense of pity I might have felt. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about justice for everyone he had wronged. As the minutes ticked down, Sarah's messages continued to arrive, each one confirming that the net was closing in. System lockdown complete. Transfer aborted. Authorities en route. Her words were clinical, detached, but they carried the weight of inevitability. There would be no escape for James now. The evidence was irrefutable, and soon, the full force of the law would descend upon him. But something inside me refused to let it end this way, not without answers. Before the police could arrive, I stepped into the room, my presence startling James so much that he nearly fell out of his chair. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with shock and fear, and for a brief moment, we simply stared at each other across the chasm of betrayal. "You knew," he whispered, his voice trembling. It wasn't a question. In that instant, I realized he had suspected I was on to him for days, maybe even weeks. Perhaps that was why he had grown increasingly agitated, why his late-night work calls had become more frequent. He had been trying to finish his plan before I could expose him. "I know everything," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "The burner phones, the shell accounts, the fake identities. All of it. You used me, James. You set me up to take the fall while you stole from my company, and from our marriage." He didn't deny it. Instead, he slumped back in his chair, defeated, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his guilt. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was heavy, charged with years of shared memories now tainted by lies and deceit. "Why?" I finally asked, the word barely audible but carrying the weight of all my pain and confusion. "Why would you do this? To me? To everyone?" James hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow, stripped of its usual charm. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he admitted. "At first, it was just small amounts. Enough to cover some investments, things I thought would pay off. But then the market turned, and I needed more. And once I started, I couldn't stop. Every time I told myself it would be the last time, something else came up, a new opportunity, a bigger risk. I convinced myself I was doing it for us, for our future." His explanation sounded hollow, even to him. The excuses tumbled out in a rush, as if saying them quickly enough might make them true. But I saw through them, saw the greed and selfishness that had driven him to betray not only me but also everyone else who had trusted him. "And framing me?" I demanded, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "Was that part of your grand plan too? Did you think I'd just roll over and accept being fired while you walked away scot-free?" He flinched at the accusation, unable to meet my eyes. "I never wanted it to come to that," he said weakly. "But when they started investigating, I panicked. I thought if they focused on you, they'd leave me alone. I didn't mean for you to get hurt, Emma. I swear." His words stung more than any physical blow ever could. How dare he claim he hadn't meant to hurt me? The depth of his betrayal was staggering, a wound that would take years, if ever, to heal. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand answers that would somehow justify the destruction he had wrought. But deep down, I knew nothing he said could undo what had been done. The sound of sirens in the distance signaled the approach of the authorities. James heard them too and visibly tensed, his hands gripping the edge of the desk as if bracing himself for impact. "They're here," he said softly, almost to himself. I nodded, stepping back toward the doorway. "Yes, they are. And this time, you won't be able to talk your way out of it." For a brief second, our eyes met again, and I saw something in his gaze that I hadn't expected: regret. Not the self-serving kind, but genuine remorse. It didn't absolve him of his crimes, nor did it erase the damage he had caused. But it was there, a flicker of humanity in the midst of chaos. When the police burst into the house moments later, I stood aside, watching as they cuffed James and read him his rights. He didn't resist, didn't argue, didn't try to explain himself. Maybe he finally understood that there was no escaping the truth. As they led him away, I felt an odd mix of emotions: relief, anger, sadness, and a strange sense of liberation. The man I had loved was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. Yet in his absence, I found a glimmer of hope. This ordeal had tested me in ways I never imagined, forcing me to confront my own strength and resilience. It had shattered illusions, yes, but it had also revealed a version of myself I hadn't known existed. In the days that followed, the fallout from James's arrest dominated headlines. The scope of his crimes was staggering, involving multiple companies and millions of dollars. Former colleagues reached out, offering apologies for doubting me and expressing gratitude for exposing the truth. Slowly but surely, my reputation began to rebuild, piece by painstaking piece. But the journey was far from over. Clearing my name within the company required navigating layers of bureaucracy and legal proceedings. I hired a lawyer who specialized in employment disputes, determined to reclaim not only my job but also the respect I had earned over years of hard work. The process was grueling, filled with depositions, hearings, and endless paperwork. Yet with each step forward, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Amidst the chaos, I discovered unexpected allies in places I hadn't anticipated. Sarah, whose initial skepticism had given way to unwavering support, became a close friend and confidant. Together, we worked tirelessly to ensure that justice was served, not just for me but for everyone affected by James's crimes. Other former colleagues joined the effort, forming a network of solidarity that helped restore my faith in humanity. Rebuilding my personal life proved more challenging. The betrayal had left scars that wouldn't fade overnight. Friends and family rallied around me, offering love and encouragement, but the road to healing was long and winding. Therapy sessions became a regular part of my routine, providing a safe space to process the trauma and begin rebuilding my sense of self-worth. Through it all, I clung to the lessons I had learned during this ordeal. Resilience wasn't about avoiding pain or hardship, it was about finding the strength to keep moving forward despite them. Trust, once broken, could never fully be restored, but it could be rebuilt, slowly and deliberately, on a foundation of honesty and transparency. One evening, as I sat on my apartment balcony watching the sunset, I reflected on how far I had come. The woman who had once doubted her ability to survive such devastation now faced the future with cautious optimism. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and opportunities alike. But for the first time in months, I felt ready to embrace whatever lay beyond the horizon. The experience had changed me in profound ways, teaching me that adversity could be a catalyst for growth. I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to create a life defined not by the pain of the past, but by the possibilities of the future. Whatever happened next, I knew I would face it with courage and grace. The final court hearing arrived, and as James stood before the judge, his head bowed in shame, I felt an unexpected wave of closure. The truth had come to light. He was sentenced to prison, his crimes laid bare for everyone to see. My company, after a thorough investigation, reinstated me with a heartfelt apology, even offering me a promotion. It wasn't just vindication, it was a chance to start anew. In the months that followed, I threw myself into my work, channeling my pain into purpose. I spearheaded initiatives to strengthen corporate security systems, ensuring no one else would fall victim to such deceit. Slowly, trust returned, both from others and within myself. One evening, as I packed up my office after a long day, Sarah appeared at my door with 2 cups of coffee. "You've earned this," she said with a smile. We sat together, talking about everything and nothing, and for the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. I realized then that while James's betrayal had shattered parts of my life, it had also revealed my own strength. I wasn't the same person I'd been before, it wasn't all bad. I had grown stronger, wiser, and more resilient. As I walked home under the glow of streetlights, I thought about the future. It wouldn't be easy, but it was mine to shape. And for the first time, I believed I could handle whatever came next. Because sometimes, rising from ashes isn't just about survival, it's about becoming someone better than you ever imagined.